Hey, I'm Tim DeStasio. This is Psychrometric Saturday, and we are staying on the subject of sensible heat ratio. Sensible heat ratio is the ratio of sensible heat load to our total heat load. So we had an example that we've been using. Our sensible heat load is 20,000, and then our total heat load is 25,000. That means we have a 0.80 sensible heat ratio. That means 80% of our heat load is sensible, which means only 20% is latent. And that's a pretty normal sensible heat ratio. It's nice and controllable, falls well within what the laws of physics say that an air conditioning system can do. But what if we have a really leaky envelope and we're pulling in a lot more moisture than we should? What does that do to our sensible heat ratio? Well, that is a real life scenario with a lot of service calls that you're probably running in the summertime. So here's what that looks like. When we have a really leaky envelope, we have a much lower sensible heat ratio. So we may have 30,000 total BTUs, only 20,000 of that is sensible. That means that our sensible heat ratio, when we divide 20,000 divided by 30,000, is only 0.67 instead of that 0.80. Now, if we recall, our sensible heat ratio scale here is where we connect a dot on the scale here on the right side. We've got another dot that represents our indoor design conditions or desired indoor conditions. Usually that's around 75 dry bulb, 55-degree wet bulb. And we need our supply air in order to maintain those conditions to fall somewhere in this quadrant below this line that connects that dot and that dot right there. But notice what happens when we have a much lower sensible heat ratio because our thermal envelope is leaky. We go from 0.80 to 0.67, which is somewhere around here. May not look like a really big change, but notice what that does to this line. All of a sudden, this quadrant got a little bit smaller, but now we've got to deliver air that's really, really cold and really, really dry. So when our air gets cooled down by the evaporator, it comes and it hits the saturation curve, and it's got to slide down the curve. In order for us to get below this line, we need to get all the way down like around here. What does that look like? Well, that's around 45-degree dry bulb temperature. That means that we would have a 30-degree drop between our return air and our supply air coming off the evaporator coil. That is not really realistic with a lot of residential systems. 30 degrees is really, really high, but that's what we would have to do. And we would have to move enough of that air in order to still maintain conditions. And that's why when we have a leaky thermal envelope, the system cannot keep up either temperature or humidity or both. It's because we simply cannot deliver enough cold enough and dry enough air to maintain those desired conditions. And that's why I always say you cannot HVAC your way out of a bad thermal envelope. So when you're going on comfort calls in the summertime and your units can't keep up, the answer is not to install a bigger unit. The answer is to fix the thermal envelope first, do a proper heat load calculation, and then install the right size air conditioning system. We're going to stay on the subject of sensible heat ratio and this line that runs through the chart in more episodes, so keep watching Psychrometric Saturday.